Wakened by a sharp knock, Alina sat up in bed. The night enveloped the room in thick darkness, with only the pale moonlight barely seeping through the gaps in the curtains. The knock repeated, this time louder, as if someone was impatiently demanding attention. She lived alone in an old house on the outskirts of town. Neighbors rarely visited, and the streetlights here always flickered. Her heart beat faster. Who could be knocking in the middle of the night? Alina carefully lowered her legs to the cold floor and put on her robe. Through the thin fabric, she felt the coolness of the night air. Step by step, she approached the door. The knock sounded again, this time accompanied by a quiet, almost whispering scraping. Peering through the peephole, Alina saw no one. Only the dim reflection of the moon on the old wooden door. She had already thought she had imagined it when the knock sounded again, this time from below, as if someone was hitting the very bottom of the door while crouching. Alina held her breath. This couldn't be a person. She stepped back from the door, feeling a chill run down her spine. The quiet scraping filled the silence again. Now it seemed to come from behind the wall itself. Alina slowly turned around. In the corner of the room, where the shadows gathered particularly densely, she noticed a barely perceptible movement. Something dark and shapeless slowly rose from the floor, as if spreading out from the darkness itself. Fear paralyzed her. She couldn't take her eyes off this eerie figure, which was taking on increasingly distinct outlines. It seemed to be reaching for her, slowly and relentlessly. Suddenly, the knocking on the door became deafening, sharp, and the dark figure in the corner took a step forward. Alina froze, watching as the dark mass in the corner took shape. At first, it looked like a blurry spot, but gradually long, bony fingers began to emerge. Then an elongated head without clear facial features, only two dark hollows where the eyes should have been. A coldness emanated from this creature. It seemed as if darkness itself had condensed into this form. The knocking on the door did not subside. Now it wasn't just tapping, but frantic, rhythmic pounding, as if someone was trying to break down the door. Alina felt panic grip her. She wanted to scream, but her throat constricted with terror. The creature in the corner slowly reached out a hand towards her. Its movements were clumsy, but there was an undeniable persistence in them. Alina realized she couldn't stand still any longer. She had to run. She turned sharply and rushed to the window. Jerking the curtain aside, she tried to open the frame, but the old wood was stuck. Her fingers trembled, vainly trying to move the latch. Behind her, she heard a quiet, hoarse sound. Alina froze. The creature was approaching. She could feel its presence, cold and ominous, without even turning around. The knocking on the door reached its peak. It seemed that any moment, it would give way. Gathering all her will, Alina sharply pulled the frame. With a creak, the window gave way, letting in the cold night air. Without hesitation, she climbed onto the windowsill. Just at that moment, she heard something heavy fall behind her. Turning around, Alina saw the dark creature standing near a broken chair, its featureless face seemingly turned towards her. From below, from behind the door, a muffled, drawn-out groan echoed. Alina jumped down, landing on the cold ground. Without looking back, she ran away from the house, her heart pounding wildly in her chest. Behind her, she could hear the frantic banging on the door and that eerie scraping from the corner. She ran, not knowing where, just to get away from this horror. The night forest greeted her with darkness and the rustling of leaves. Alina stumbled over tree roots, her breathing becoming increasingly ragged. But even through the sound of the wind and her own heavy breathing, she continued to hear that muffled groan, which seemed to come from everywhere. Alina ran through the dark forest, branches painfully whipping her face and hands. Fear propelled her forward, not allowing her to stop. It seemed the muffled groan echoed somewhere very close, as if an invisible shadow was gliding behind her between the trees. Finally, through the thick leaves, she saw a faint flicker of light. It instilled hope. Perhaps there was someone's house there, where she could find help. Gathering her last strength, Alina ran in that direction. The light grew brighter, and soon she found herself in a small clearing. In the middle of it stood an old, dilapidated house. The windows glowed with a dim yellow light, and quiet, indistinct sounds came from inside. Alina stopped, hesitating. Was it safe here? What if it was a trap? But where else could she go? From behind, from the darkness of the forest, that eerie groan echoed again. Taking a deep breath, Alina cautiously approached the house. The door was ajar. She peered inside. In the room, an old kerosene lamp burned, casting eerie shadows on the walls. An old woman with long gray hair falling over her shoulders sat at the table. She was muttering something quietly to herself, not paying attention to Alina. "Excuse me?" Alina called out softly. The old woman sharply raised her head. Her eyes were dim and somehow empty. She looked at Alina without blinking. "Do you hear them?" the old woman croaked, her voice sounding strange, like rusty metal. "Hear who?" Alina asked fearfully. "Those who knock. Those who wait," the old woman whispered, and her gaze became even more chilling. Suddenly, from outside, the same sharp knocking that Alina had heard in her own house echoed again. And then, the same quiet, scraping sound joined it. The old woman slowly rose from her chair. Her movements were slow and jerky. She looked past Alina, towards the door. "They've come for you," the old woman said, and a gruesome smile appeared on her face. Alina felt horror grip her again. This house was not salvation. It was something else, something much worse. The knocking on the door grew louder and more insistent, and the old woman began to slowly approach Alina, her dim eyes staring intently at her. What awaits Alina in this cursed house? Will she be able to escape from those who knock, and from this terrifying old woman? And what truly hides in the darkness of the forest, making that eerie groan? Panic overwhelmed Alina. She understood she had to get out of this place immediately. The old woman was approaching, her gaze filled with some sinister curiosity. The knocking on the door now sounded like a frantic drumbeat. Alina spun around and rushed to the window she had peered through moments before. It seemed the only way out, but the old woman moved surprisingly fast. Before Alina could reach the window, the old woman grabbed her arm. Her fingers were cold and bony, like dead wood. Alina felt a chill run down her spine. "You won't leave?" the old woman croaked, her grip surprisingly strong. Alina tried to pull away, but the old woman held her tightly. Her dim eyes stared straight into Alina's soul, and there was nothing human in that gaze. Suddenly, the knocking on the door reached its peak. The wood splintered, and the door burst open with a crash. Standing in the doorway was a dark figure, similar to the one Alina had seen in her own house. Shapeless, but palpably ominous. The creature silently stared at Alina with its dark hollows instead of eyes. A coldness emanated from it, the same coldness as from the old woman. The old woman released Alina's arm and took a step back, allowing the dark figure into the room. Her face now held not just a smile, but a true snarl, full of malevolence. "They've come. For both of us," the old woman whispered, her voice now sounding almost joyful. Alina froze in terror. Now there were two of them, and they were looking at her. The dark creature slowly took a step forward. The shapeless hands reached out towards Alina. She felt an overwhelming horror that paralyzed her will. And from the darkness beyond the door, the same muffled, drawn-out groan echoed, now much louder and closer. It seemed something else was waiting outside. Will Alina be able to escape this trap? Who are these creatures? And what lurks in the darkness beyond the door, making that terrifying sound? Suddenly, the old woman made a strange, gurgling sound and pointed a trembling finger at Alina. The dark creature moved forward. Alina closed her eyes, awaiting the inevitable. But instead of a cold touch, she heard only a sharp, piercing scream from the old woman. Opening her eyes, Alina saw something unbelievable. The old woman stood between her and the dark creature, her body beginning to shrivel and crumble into dust. The dark creature froze, as if struck by an invisible force, but it lasted only a moment. Then the creature turned its attention back to Alina, and its dark hollows seemed to glow with an evil light. From beyond the door, the groan became almost a shriek. What is happening? Why did the old woman protect her? And what horror awaits beyond the door? Confused, Alina watched as the dust that remained of the old woman swirled in the air. The dark creature seemed disoriented for a moment, but quickly turned its attention back to Alina. The shapeless hand reached forward again. Just at that moment, the door splintered and burst open, and something incredible entered the room. It wasn't another dark creature. It was light, bright, blinding white light, from which the darkness itself seemed to recede. Along with the light, a tall figure dressed in white entered the room. In its hands, it held a glowing cross. Seeing it, the dark creature hissed and recoiled, its shapeless body beginning to convulse. From beyond the door, a final, mournful groan echoed, after which everything fell silent. The figure in white approached Alina. Its face was calm and radiated kindness. "Fear not, child," the stranger said in a quiet, gentle voice. "It is over." Alina couldn't speak. She looked from the stranger to the dark creature, which was slowly dissolving into the shadows of the corners of the room, as if it had never been there. "Who are you?" Alina finally whispered. "I am one who comes at the call of the suffering," the stranger replied. "This house was stained by darkness. The old woman. She was once good, but her heart was twisted by grief, and it drew evil here." "And those who knocked?" Alina asked, shuddering at the memory of the eerie sounds. "They were souls trapped between worlds, whom this darkness would not release," the stranger explained. "Now they are free." He extended a hand to Alina, helping her to her feet. "You need to leave this place. It is no longer safe." Alina nodded, still not fully comprehending what had happened. She took the stranger's hand, and together they left the cursed house into the cool night air. With the first rays of the morning sun beginning to break through the trees, Alina's fear began to recede, giving way to deep exhaustion and gratitude. She didn't know who this mysterious rescuer was, but she felt that her nightmare was over. However, looking back at the dark silhouette of the old house disappearing behind the trees, Alina couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere in the darkness, shadows might still lurk, just waiting for their time to knock again. The end.